This video is intended to be an instructional aid in setting up a Yome home. It is designed to be used in conjunction with the written instructions. You can watch this video and get an overall idea of how a Yome is assembled, and then use the written instructions out in the field to refer to specifics as you set up a Yome. This is what the easily portable Yome home looks like unassembled. The first step is to identify the various components and establish some terminology. First, notice that some of the poles are longer than the rest. These are the roof rafter poles. Next, notice that some of the poles have bent eye bolts on both sides. These are the top plate poles. The poles with a straight eye bolt on one side and a bent eye bolt on the other are the side support poles. The remaining poles are made of treated lumber and are the base plate poles. You'll notice two separate canvas coverings. The one that is white is the side cover, for it covers the Yome sides. The remaining canvas is the roof cover because it covers the dome's roof. On the sidewall covering, you can identify the top side by locating the elastic cords and S-hooks, which are used to hang the covering. The inside of the roof covering can be identified as the side that has the webbing sewn into its corners. The metal poles with wood ends are the overhang poles. Now to identify the hardware. Basically, the Yome is held together by bolting the eye bolts on the ends of the support poles. The idea is to thread a washer onto a bolt. The bolt then goes through the eye bolts, and another washer and nut are threaded on to hold it all secure. The final holding nuts will be exposed to the elements and are hot dip galvanized. The rope is to lace the grommets in the side cover to the roof cover grommets to hold them taut. These are the stay-put fasteners used to secure the base of the door flap, allowing it to be opened and closed. The tension cable, thimble, and wire nut hardware are used to hold the overhang poles taut. The loose eye bolts are for attaching the overhang poles to the tension cable. The mushroom-shaped copper or plastic piece is called the vent cover. You'll notice a threaded rod. The vent cover bolts to the threaded rod to hold it above the vent opening. The roof rafter poles have a mark on them identifying which end forms the top center apex of the Yome's framework. The first step in erecting a Yome is to build the roof frame on the deck or ground. First, lay the roof rafters out so they radiate from a center point like the spokes of a wheel, spacing them equally apart. The marked ends of the rafter poles goes towards the center. Now take the top plate poles and lay them around the perimeter in between each of the roof rafter poles. Take the threaded rod and thread a nut onto it about 3 inches up. On top of that, place a washer. Holding the 3-inch side of the rod, pick up the roof supports and place them on the rod so their center eye bolts are resting on the washer and nut. They can be placed in any order. Place a washer and thread a nut onto the top of the rod, holding the center roof support eye bolts into place. The top plate poles are attached to the free eye bolts of the roof rafters with a bolt, washers, and a nut. With the bolts threads facing outward, bolt the top plate eye bolts together and then the roof rafter eye bolt on top. The bends of all the eye bolts should be inwards. Tighten down the nuts. Each one of these bolts will be called the corner bolts. Continue around the perimeter, attaching the eye bolts on the roof rafter pole to the top plate poles. If the threaded rod isn't being held up vertically, loosen the nut to adjust it so it is vertical and tighten down the nuts. Drape the roof cover over the roof frame so the center grommet of the roof cover is over the threaded rod in the apex of the roof frame. Make sure the roof cover is right side out and take caution not to tear the roof cover on the protruding rod. Arrange the roof cover so each of the exposed grommets line up with the corner bolts in the frame without attaching them. The next step is to attach the vent cover. Fold up one side of the roof covering so the top bolt on the roof's apex can be reached. Thread a nut and washer onto the top of the threaded rod. The vent cover will sit on top of the threaded rod. Adjust how much of a vent opening you desire by threading the rod up or down through the two nuts, keeping the rod vertical. Place the hole in the vent cover's underside onto the rod. Thread a nut onto the end of the rod and tighten. This will have to be done by feel. Now the side support poles need to be attached to the roof frame. Align two side support poles so the bent eye bolts are on the roof frame's corner bolt and each pair of side poles face opposite directions from each other. They should lay on the ground almost parallel to the top plate poles. The bend of the side support pole's eye bolts go inward. Thread a washer and nut onto the corner bolts. Don't tighten the nut, rather thread the nut only onto the very end of the bolt. Proceed around the perimeter of the roof frame, attaching a pair of side support poles to each corner, letting the poles rest on top of each other. Set the base poles around the perimeter of the roof assembly so they will be easy to grab as the roof goes up. Set them so the bend of their eye bolts faces inward. Lift two adjacent corners up so the side support poles swing down into place. Lift until the base eye bolts of the adjoining side support poles meet. Grab two of the base poles and bolt their eye bolts to the base eye bolts of the side support poles. These four eye bolts can be bolted together in any order with the threads of the eye bolt facing outward. As a precaution, devise a way to temporarily secure the first couple base plate poles together, either by screwing them into the deck or staking them down. This will assure that they won't move as the rest of the assembly is raised. At this point, you will have part of the structure in the air and part on the ground. Continue around the perimeter of the framework, lifting each corner and aligning the base eye bolts of each set of adjacent side support poles. Bolt them to each successive pair of base pole eye bolts. If any corners kick out of place, move them back and screw or stake them down. Once erected, arrange the base plate poles until they form the same shape as the top plate poles. For example, this yome is a 7-sided septagram. Tighten the top corner nut so the previously tightened nut disappears into the eye bolt eyes. Proceed around the perimeter, tightening all the top plate and base plate corner eye bolts until they're snug. The base plate poles need to be secured. Either screw them into the deck or stake them into the ground. next step is to secure and fit the roof covering. Stretch the roof covering so each of its corner grommets fit over and onto the corner bolts. Once the roof covering is secured, it needs to be stretched to fit. The eye bolts on the ends of the roof supports are each threaded in opposite directions. When you twist the roof support in one direction, it expands and contracts when twisted in the opposite direction. Continue pulling the corners of the roof fabric so the grommets stretch over the corner bolts. It should be tight but not too hard to stretch. If you experience difficulty, you can turn the roof supports so they contract and the roof fabric will fit more easily. Secure the cover onto the corner grommets with galvanized washers and nuts. Twist the roof rafter poles until the threads in the eye bolts show, or until the roof is completely taut. Now it is time to install the overhang pole cable system. Standing on a ladder, thread the free end of the tension cable through the small hole located near the center of one of the roof support poles. Now thread the cable through a loose eye bolt and through the hole in the next roof support pole. Continue this procedure, threading an eye bolt between each set of roof support poles. Secure the cable with a thimble and 2 wire clips. First thread the 2 wire clips onto the cable, then wrap the cable around the thimble and back through one of the wire clips. Open the turnbuckle and hook it onto the 2 thimbles. Pull the cable on through the thimble until it's tight. Use the other already secured thimble assembly on the other end as an example of how to set and space the thimble and wire nuts. Tighten the wire nuts with a 5/16 inch wrench or socket. Take the hole on the end of the overhang pole and thread it onto each of the loose eye bolts hanging from their tension cable. Turn the pole clockwise until the eye bolt is threaded as far as it possibly will go onto the eye bolt. Bring the free end of the metal pole up over the top plate pole. Slide the eye bolt on the end of the metal pole next to where the cable goes through the roof rafter. Slide the hardwood plug on the free end of the overhang pole into the webbing pocket in the corner of the roof covering's overhang. Pull out the Velcro flaps so they are on the inside covering on the top plate poles. Continue attaching all overhang poles. Tighten the cable by turning the turnbuckle. Twist the turnbuckle so its sharp points face away from the roof covering. Push the eye bolt ends of the overhang poles so they rest in the center of the tension cable. Now twist the overhang poles as the eye bolts expand. Twist until the threads of the eye bolts start to show. This will stretch the roof's overhang and hold it tight. As a precaution, if the Yome might experience extreme wind, attach the overhang pole to the top plate pole with a piece of rope or wire.